Well, welcome. Welcome to the Baskin School of Engineering. Thanks for coming out on a Saturday morning and to honor Ira. In physics, Festschrifts are not uncommon ways to recognize people at important junctures of their career. Doing some research, I found that one physicist had 5 Festschrifts. A Festschrift is a book. It originally was a book to honor a person, a celebration in writing, and that has morphed over the years. I've actually never seen a book come out of these things. Usually it's a series of papers or talks, and now it's become where a lot of the talks are reminiscences, and it's a chance for old friends to get together, and for the new generation to witness the passing of the torch, as it were, intellectually and academically. I want to thank Ira and Kate for helping us organize this. I want to thank Heidi, Cindy Miller, Alan Wong, Tim Bench for doing a lot of work making this day happen. And this is, I think, a first for the School of Engineering, but I think it's appropriate. We're at a juncture. The School of Engineering is sort of entering a new phase of maturity. We're doing a lot of things that larger, older organizations do, and this is, in some sense, the beginning of a mature School of Engineering. And so I think you all have the program for today, and hopefully you can hang around to the end. We'll have a nice reception at the end, and mainly it's just a chance to get together. So with that, I'd like to introduce Alan Wong, who will say a few words. Alan is Director of Development in the School of Engineering.
Thank you, Art. When I first met Professor Pohl, I learned that he has been teaching for over 40 years, and I just did a quick calculation. I think, okay, 40 times, okay, let's say if it is only 250 students a year, and then over all this time, I think, wow, 10,000 people actually learn from him, and that's a big number. And a little bit later, I just learned that his number actually changed all of a sudden to like 50,000. Oh, actually, I first learned it was 30,000. Then a few weeks later, 40,000. A few more weeks later, it's like 60,000. And it's so amazing to me that, wow, how many people actually get to learn from him. And, well, because he has been actually working on this new, I guess at the time, dealing with the online education initiative, and he actually enabled a lot of his colleagues at this school, right, to be able to impact that many students. So it's just amazing. And my main reason to come up here is also to let you know that in honor of Professor Pohl, we just established the Ira and Kate Pohl Endowed Scholarship, and there are some materials up there, and I would encourage you all to participate and help us in to honor Ira with this Endowed Scholarship. And next, I'm going to bring up our Director of Corporate Development, Tim Bench, and he is going to introduce our speakers for the day.
Thank you, Alan, and welcome, everybody. The speakers today are Ira's colleagues and students who have collaborated with him over the years, sharing his diverse interest in artificial intelligence, graph theory, combinatorics, computer science education, online and distance learning, programming language, software engineering, and the social impacts of technology. They've been invited today to share their visions and perspectives with the UCSC community. And our first guest is here via modern technology. I'm going to introduce him in absentia. Our first speaker is Ellis Horowitz, Professor of Computer Science and Electrical Engineering at the University of Southern California. Ellis is past Director of Information Technology and Distance Education at the USC Vertibi School of Engineering. He's authored various publications in diverse areas of computer science, including data structures, algorithms, programming language, software design, and computer science education. And here is Ellis via video. And
everybody, this is Ellis Horowitz speaking down at USC, and Ira, congratulations on your 40th year. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to celebrate with everybody else, and I'm really sorry I can't get up there. I was fully planned. I had my plane reservation. I had the Hertz car and everything, and then I went on this bike ride and fell off, and the rest is history. I'm very happy at least that I can be seated here in the studio because I can't walk more than about, 100 yards, and then I've got to sit down again. But they tell me it's getting better, and I didn't break anything. So when I thought about what I would actually talk about, I thought about the two of us and how much we've done over the years and how I really knew you. And I guess one of the main ways I knew Ira, for everybody who's there, is he used to come down to USC because years ago, in fact, starting in the 1960s, we had a system called the Instructional Interactive TV Center, which used to broadcast graduate engineering courses to people who had the proper satellite dishes. And given the fact we have a lot of aerospace companies here in Southern California, it was very natural for us to set it up. So I could say we've been doing distance learning for, 40 or 50 years, and of course we're still doing it very aggressively. So it seemed, and Ira used to come down, and Ira in the summertime, and in fact the two of us used to give these one-week short courses to industry using our system. Now it's called DEND, for Distance Education Network. So it seemed relevant, at least, that one thing I could talk about was the latest twist in the world of online education, which are the so-called MOOCs, or massively open online courses. So what I've got here is kind of an overview. I hope it's not too boring for those of you who already know about MOOCs, but I hope that at least many of you, this information will be new. Now, of course, Ira and I have been working actually for about the same amount of time. What it actually looked like back then. Couldn't believe it. I couldn't find one that was in the same time period. Don't I look clear, kind of much cleaner cut, I guess. But I think Ira's might have been taken in the late 60s, early 70s. Mine, I think, was taken a little earlier. But that's how we looked years ago, believe it or not. And of course, we started writing books. And there we go. We had a couple of books. I know I couldn't include all of Ira's, and I couldn't include all of mine. I looked at a couple of these. Ira seemed to like dissection. It's sort of a funny word. You'll have to explain to the audience why he picked out the word dissection. And you can see that he was definitely a programming language guy all the way, Java, C++, C#. I sort of bounced around from data structures to algorithms to programming languages. But the books were very important in the sense that they were inspired by our teaching, and it wasn't long after writing the books that we started giving these short courses. So let's talk about MOOCs. So a MOOC, I have the definition up top, an online course allowing unlimited participation and open access via the web. And so yes, lots of issues do arise when you start thinking about, as an institution, whether or not you're going to support MOOCs. And so one of the big issues is massive, because if you're going to support massive type courses, with hundreds of thousands of people signing up, you're obviously going to need a big infrastructure. And what about registering these people? You're going to need a lot of software to develop to handle those sorts of volumes. Is it going to be an online course, or is it going to be self-paced? I mean, are you actually going to have instructors and TAs and graders and the whole set of people watching and helping people as they go through, or is it just going to be students working on their own? Is the content going to be open, or is it going to be restricted? You know, for our own graduate courses here at USC, the course content is restricted to those who are actually officially enrolled in the class, which brings up the whole issue of charging. Is it going to be free? Is it going to be affordable? Are we going to charge what we charge our on-campus students, or are we going to charge more, or are we going to charge less? Is there going to be real-time interaction, another big element which adds a lot to the computational infrastructure as well as to the load on staff? And are we going to give them college credit, a major issue, which I'll talk a little bit more when we get into it? And are we actually going to establish a learning community, like we have here on campus with students who actually sit in our classrooms? So all in all, there's quite a few issues. And finally, scripted assessments. I mean, are we going, if we have thousands of students, are we going to have some automated way of determining how well they did? So this is sort of what I thought was the scope of issues arising over MOOCs. Now, the class that got it started all here, or started it all, was a course given by Sebastian Thrun of Stanford and Peter Norvig, who's a director of research at Google, and I have a little videotape where they discussed how things got started, so let's play that.
We challenged ourselves to create an online class that would be equal or better in quality to our Stanford class, but to bring it to anyone in the world for free.
We sent out one email. We are offering our class to the world free of charge.
And within 2 weeks, 50,000 people had signed up for it. And that grew to 160,000 students from 209 countries.
The online medium is quite amazing. We decided to flip the entire way we teach. Rather than lecturing students, we decided to quiz students.
A student said, this class felt like sitting in a bar with a really smart friend who's explaining something you haven't grasped but are about to. And that's exactly what we were aiming for. We're now offering the historic AI class again on the Udacity platform.
So come join us. It's the old technology, still paper and pencils, but you can take this class for free at your own pace at udacity.com.
All right, so there you go. That was kind of the thing that got the whole thing started, at least in our community, the community that we're sort of familiar with. But when one looked around, it turned out that there were other efforts that were making major inroads in online education. And the one that's often cited, which you may have seen described on 60 Minutes, and for which Bill Gates is apparently a real fan, is a thing called the Khan Academy. So Mr. Khan, whose picture there is in the upper right, kind of started in a very informal way, sort of helping out some of the family, and the thing has grown tremendously in popularity. So I thought it would be interesting to sort of contrast what Thrun and Norvig were doing with the kind of lectures that Khan gives. So let's listen in a little bit to the Khan Academy lecture on raising complex I to higher powers.
Now that we've seen that as we take I to higher and higher powers, cycles between 1, I, -1, negative I, then back to 1, I, -1, and negative I want to see if we can tackle some, I guess you could call them trickier problems, and you might see these surface, and they're also kind of fun to do, to realize that you can use this, the fact that the powers of I cycle through these values, you can use this to really, on the back of an envelope, take arbitrarily high powers of I. So let's try, just for fun, let's see what I to the 100th power is. And the realization here is that 100 is a multiple of 4. So you could say that this is the same thing as I to the 4 times 25th power. And this is the same thing, just from our exponent properties, is I to the 4th power raised to the 25th power. Right? If you have something raised to an exponent and then that is raised to an exponent, that's the same thing as multiplying the two exponents. And we know that I to the fourth, that's pretty straightforward. I to the fourth is just 1. I to the fourth is 1, so this is 1. This is equal to 1 to the 25th power, which is just equal to 1. So,
Okay, let me stop it there. So you might like, I don't know whether you like the style or not. You notice that he's not on screen at all. He's just a nice, pleasant voice in the background. So all you need to do, or in fact where the whole focus is on exactly what he's talking about. And you notice it's very informal. He's just sort of like writing on a pad and it's appearing. So apparently it's resonated well with quite a large group of people. Now, given the success of the Stanford class and Khan Academy, what we then saw was a sort of burst of Silicon Valley entrepreneurial activity, and so we had Sebastian Thrun creating Udacity, and we had 2 other Stanford computer science faculty members, Andrew Ng and Daphne Kohler, creating the company Coursera. And on the other side of the coast, of course, we had MIT, which had long been a player with their open courseware initiative in putting content online, creating a nonprofit, in contrast with the other 2, Udacity and Coursera, which of course are for-profit. The nonprofit edX, soon joined by their neighbor Harvard, and of course there are quite a few others as well that are sort of jumping into the space. And so snapshotting things sort of in early 2014, you can see what's going on here. We get tremendous growth in courses. edX at the time was offering almost 100 courses from a variety of institutions. Coursera had several hundred, 325. Udacity, a little less, but handling very large numbers. So there's been sort of a raft of faculty members getting involved with these various organizations and putting these courses out. And so one of our the for-profit providers, Dennis Yang, who is CEO or president at Udemy, has suggested this little cycle of where MOOCs currently are. So you have sort of the hype is in, was the title of his graph. And so you see you have some excitement, a lot of early excitement as the curve goes up. And then with all the inflated expectations, you have the trough of disillusionment. And then you have the slope of enlightenment and the plateau of productivity. Now, where exactly we are at this point is hard to say. I think we've definitely gone beyond the peak of inflated expectations. And I don't know whether we're on the left side of the trough or we're hopefully on the right side. I think it's probably fair to say we've gone through the lowest trough of disillusionment. We have some fairly good idea of what moves are all about. And so we're sort of trying to figure out where that plateau of productivity is going to end up. Now, one of the courses I thought I'd take a little closer look at was MIT, and take a look at their Python course, since this is, Ira and I are both professors of computer science, so it's Python is sort of a topic near and dear to our heart. And here's sort of the home page of 6.00.1, Introduction to Computer Science and Programming Using Python, and the instructor is Eric Grimson, and I've got the URL down there if you want to take a look at it. And as you sort of walk around their website, you kind of get a sense of, look at that line, study, have fun. Let's see, point it out, study, have fun, uncover a new passion, or learn skills that may change your life. So there's definitely an effort on behalf of these various companies to kind of get people's passion and excitement up with the various courses they're offering. And you can see they're pushing hard, real classes, amazing experiences, sort of like a marketing blitz. But let's take a look in a little more detail. So here's a snapshot of Eric giving one of his introductory lectures, not too long. Capturing computation as a function.
So far, we've been building up our repertoire of Python expressions. We've seen numbers and strings as primitive data objects. We've seen assignment, the ability to give a name to a value. We've seen input and output characteristics. We've seen the ability to make comparisons. And we've added in looping constructs, things like for and while loops. With that set of tools, they turn out to be sufficient to give us what we call a Turing-complete language. What does that mean? It says just with that set of tools, anything that's computable, we can compute. So we can compute anything. That's actually amazing. With just that set of tools, anything that's computable, we can capture with a description using those sets of tools. Sounds like we're done. And of course we're not. And part of the reason we're not is that the code we're able to write so far, those scripts that we've done, lack what we call abstraction.
Okay, I'll stop on abstraction. I don't know what your reaction is to this, but I guess my reaction was gray-haired white guys giving these lectures, of which I am one in that class, really makes me wonder. I guess when you see it on TV or online, I guess a pretty face makes a lot more sense. But anyway, that's another aspect. I'm not sure it plays well in this particular arena. But anyway, I looked at what else edX had to offer, and you can see they're offering quite a bit. So in addition to the video lectures, they've got an array of features, including a wiki, a discussion group. They are using a textbook. They've got this history panel that you see up here, providing links to all of the lectures, so that's very conveniently arrayed. One of the things that I was very impressed with was they actually give you a running subtitles as the instructor lectures. So I don't know how they've actually done this. I looked into this when I was the head of DEN myself, and I think it's very helpful, certainly for people around the world whose English may not be their first language and who find, let's say, the particular instructor's accent hard to grasp. They can actually read what he's saying off to the right-hand side. I was very impressed with that. And then in addition, you can download the transcript, you can download the actual video, and you can download the slides. So you might say edX is a very mature system. It's really a fully functional distance learning environment. Now, of course, things, as you would expect, don't always go smoothly. So as I looked around on their Python course and their discussion forum, I noticed that there were a couple of things that cropped up. So on October 25th, for example, there was a small change, the unbound local error, local variable A, reference before assignment changed to unbound local error, local variable C. So I think our programming language people in the audience will kind of get a chuckle out of that. And of course, on November 11th, there was a problem with the servers. And then a little later that day, there was a problem with the graders again. But then November 12th, the grader issue was resolved. And by December 2nd, the graders are working now. Oh, and then later on, the graders were down again. So, and edX has been notified that today is a national holiday. So I didn't want to make it all seem like it was perfect and smooth. These are obviously the kinds of things that will always happen in any of these online courses and have to be handled as smoothly as possible. Now, switching gears a little bit and thinking about granting actual credit and degrees for these online courses, the school that has gone the farthest in this direction has been Georgia Tech, which, with a big announcement, is offering an entirely online computer science master's program. This is not to say that it's the first, because, for example, SC has been offering an online computer science master's program for actually many years. But they had a lot of buzz with it. And the interesting, perhaps, or the shocking thing was that the master's degree is being offered for $6,600, far less than the $45,000 on-campus price. The $45,000 is sort of similar to our master's. Ours is a 27-unit master's, probably, a unit is over $1,000, so it's at least $35,000 to get a master's degree in computer science at USC. So Georgia Tech is going to provide the content and the professors, and they're going to get 60% of the revenue. And Udacity is actually going to provide the computer infrastructure, and they're going to get 40%. So there's a 60-40 split. So even for the $6,600, the university is not going to get, is only going to get 60% of that. The budget they were projecting is something like $3.1 million, but they did raise $2 million from AT&T. So in that sense, I think it hasn't taken a large investment on the part of Georgia Tech to start something like this. And then finally, by the third year, their projection is $14 million in costs and $4 million in profits. I mean, the thing that I appreciate about this is the fact they actually have worked out the details to the extent that they have a fairly, hopefully a fairly good grasp of the financial issues involved. I think at SC, we do not feel we want to cannibalize our own online program by offering at a discount. And in fact, we charge a little extra for people who are taking the online master's degree on top of the normal tuition rate that they would have to pay. So we'll be watching this very carefully. Some of the obvious advantages here, I suppose, is that people don't have to go to campus, and so they don't have to worry if they're overseas. They don't have to worry about getting visas and whatnot. Now, there was an interesting article that just appeared in the latest issue of the Communications, which did an extensive study of students who participated in one of the edX courses, and you should take a look at that if you get a chance. It's in the April 2014. I reproduced one of the graphs here and tried to summarize their major points. So the major point, I guess, was that once you put all of the students online, and if you have a complete set of online tools, you're in an ideal environment to sort of track exactly how the students went ahead to learn. That is, how long did they look at the videos, and when did they go to the textbook, and how hard were the exercises, and how many completed them and how many didn't, what sort of questions were asked. So in terms of methodology, many of the MOOCs, including the ones, at least that I'm talking about here for edX, basically mirrored the traditional course. So you had your instructor sitting at a table, just like you saw with Grimson, giving a lecture that he would have given even if he wasn't being captured. They had 154,000 people registered for the class, 46,000 never even accessed the class, only about 9,200 received certificates. So there was about a 6% completion rate, which seems to be fairly typical. A lot of people, sign up initially, but very few actually manage to get through to the end. They had all sorts of tracking logs to determine how much time was spent watching the video, participating in the discussion groups, how much time was spent on homework, and that's what these graphs are off to the right. I guess when you can stop my video at some point, maybe blow this up and take a look, or get the Communications article, and you can see in sort of more detail where people were spending their time. So some final thoughts here. Clearly the MOOCs are addressing a demand. The idea, first of all, of taking the class wherever and whenever is very convenient for the student. Lots of these students are working elsewhere. They can't come down to campus. They certainly can't come down during normal hours. That's always been the case with these courses that we've delivered in a distance education mode. But more importantly, for accessing content that's not even available, maybe in your city or even in your country, this is giving people an opportunity around the world to have exposure to an education that they would have no hope of actually accessing. On the other hand, getting into MOOCs requires a very significant capital investment if you're starting from scratch. So we're talking about computer infrastructure needed, we're talking about all kinds of staff needed for capturing the course, for editing the material, for monitoring it as the students are going through, general administration. And of course, there's the whole issue of the course authors, At SC, for example, we teach the courses. We don't get any special compensation for teaching online. In fact, many of us like to teach online because we get a lot of wonderful support here from the camera operator and various people. So it's not particularly a burden, but if it was being done for a for-profit, then of course there's some sort of compensation scheme going on. And then, so mostly I think the major issues is whether or not you're going to grant certificates or actual course credit or even degrees. I think the degrees are probably the most controversial. Is it going to cannibalize your on-campus programs? And is it going to reduce faculty costs, which was one of the claims, or is it even going to encounter faculty resistance, which it did at one or two schools where they tried to introduce this? So I hope I've at least caused you to at least come up to date on where we are with these moves. And I wanted to say, finally, congratulations, Ira. It's a wonderful day, and I hope you have a fabulous time. I'm really sorry to miss it. And I hope we can get together soon. I want to hear all about how the day went. So congratulations again, and best wishes. Speaking down at USC, and Ira.
You can just minimize it. Daniel, doesn't he have slides? One of these. The one that says Pohl.
Yes. Great, thanks.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Our next speaker is Daniel Edelson. Daniel is the Senior Director of Software Systems Engineering at Broadcom. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you.
Daniel earned his PhD in computer science from UCSC, supervised by Ira. His thesis work on embedding garbage collection in C++ via smart pointers was used as a model for smart pointer design patterns. We would also like to thank Daniel for his gracious and generous donation to the Ira and Kate Pohl Endowment Scholarship. Please welcome Daniel Edelson.
No, because I have some animation.
Sure.
So I'd like to do it.
Okay, then let me just get it started and we'll be good to go. Come on.
Want me to use my own laptop?
Is this I don't think it's the laptop. Here, we got someone coming.
All right. Well, while they try to bring up the presentation, let me introduce what I'll be speaking to you about. I'm not going to try and educate you on the state of the world today. I'm not here to teach anything. I'm not here to share what I do or what my interests are. What I am, I'm very grateful to have this opportunity. I am deeply appreciative of everybody who allowed me to be here today. I am going to take this opportunity to reflect on some of Ira's research from, 28 years ago, and show how it's relevant in our world today. It's relevant to every single person in this room right now. That's why I got the subtitle for my presentation, The More Things Change, in fact, the more they stay the same. So what I'll be discussing with you now is some of Ira's research from the 1980s, which I'm using his class, Computer Programming 203, or Computer and Information Science 203 Programming Languages, which I took with him a long time ago. I'm using that as a proxy for his research in the 1980s when I was his undergraduate and then graduate student. And I will be relating that to the industry right now, systems programming, firmware, high-tech devices, the gadgets that you're all wearing, and showing you how really the world has not changed as much as it sometimes appears to have changed. So the agenda for my talk here, I'm going to show you how the thrust of my material here is going to be on the C programming language, because Ira gave me an opportunity to collaborate with him on some of his research in programming languages, particularly focused on C programming, and I'll be reviewing some of his research. I'm not quite sure what just happened here. I don't think.
You got me. Okay.
All right, are we good?
Yeah.
All right, so I'll be reflecting on some of Ira's research as a way of, showing respect for how relevant his thought processes and his material has been, his scientific investigation. Comparing that to the state of system software engineering today in our high-tech gadgets and in the world around us, and showing you how things don't really necessarily change all that much, despite appearances. And then a redux. I have two different conclusions showing how things don't really necessarily change that much. So, circa 1980s, what was the state of the world? You had Ada, Fortran, and COBOL were really, really important programming languages, but they were all in their particular areas of expertise and responsibility and proficiency. Ada was premier in the defense industry, defense segment. Fortran epitomized scientific programming, scientific research, physics. And COBOL was firmly entrenched in banking and was very suitable for banking. But C was growing in popularity. More and more people were using C. It had originally been introduced as the implementation language for Unix, but it was in the process of growing from being a somewhat specialized systems and kernel language to being more of a general purpose language that anybody could use for any purpose. And C had a number of competitors that came out roughly in that time frame, like Pascal and Modula 2, but they didn't overtake it. They met some success, but they did not replace C in its growth, both in systems programming and more generally in information systems. In the 1980s, there were a number of influential books. I've listed my favorites, of course, K&R, which is our Bible in this industry, a book on C by Kelly and Pohl, two of my favorite people, and the C reference manual, Harbison and Steele. These were very, very formative and very influential books. There were a number of products that also came out in the 1980s which epitomize what was happening in the industry in this time. Borland Turbo C brought C to the masses. You had a personal computer, you had your IBM PC, you had your whatnot, and you could go buy Turbo C from Borland and you could do anything you wanted. And that was somewhat new, right? You didn't need a mini computer or a mainframe to do computing and to do C computing, to do systems programming. You could do it right on your PC. And you had SunOS. SunOS was one of the best products in the world at that time. It penetrated very, very deeply into academia and into industry. It was a great, great system, and it was all in C. And you had Microsoft and SCO Xenix, which was also bringing Unix to the masses, to startups, to small companies, to mid-sized companies. You didn't need to be McDonnell Douglas or IBM to be working in Xenix, to be working in Unix, and to be working in C. Anybody, all of a sudden, could afford these tools, could afford this technology. So it was really a catalyst for an explosion for growth. What else happened in the 80s, pardon me? Well, Ira was doing research in programming languages in the 80s. And I was an undergraduate student here at Santa Cruz. And Ira very graciously and generously gave me the opportunity to collaborate with him in his research. And during my senior year of undergraduate, Ira's research included an analysis of some of the deficiencies of the C programming language as a way of introducing his ongoing research into object-oriented programming and modularity and the C++ programming languages, abstract data types, class relationships, inheritance. And so that research produced a paper on the shortcomings of C, which was published in Computer Languages, a journal in Great Britain. And I remain, grateful to Ira for allowing me to collaborate with him on this research. So I wanted to review with you some of the points that Ira made in his research and relate those to our world. So here are a few of the shortcomings of C that Ira taught the world through his research through this journal publication. C has weak typing, interchangeability between pointer and integer. Probably there are many C programmers here in this audience. I'm sure we're all familiar with just how easy it is to say I equals int p. It is unbelievably easy. And that was, I think that's been the bane of many blue screens. Extensibility through the preprocessor is inadequate. So introduce the preprocessor. The preprocessor is a very, very, very weak system for accomplishing named constants and for accomplishing very, very fast, tight, small code that doesn't have the overhead of passing parameters, establishing a call stack, and returning. C has statement type limitations like the multi-branch switch statement, which is simply a primitive control structure. It's easy to make mistakes. And array bound checking. What's an array in C? An array is a pointer, right? P plus I. You can do anything with arrays. You can do anything with pointers. It's really, really primitive. It's like walking around with a loaded gun and your finger on the trigger all the time pointed at your foot. It's just dangerous. Well, despite those deficiencies of C, despite how dangerous a tool it is in our arsenal, despite its deficiencies, despite the existence of alternatives, because there have been plenty of alternatives. It's not like we didn't have a choice. It's not like we couldn't choose Modula 2, or we couldn't choose ultimately Java, or Pascal, or C++. We had plenty of options. We had object-oriented programming languages growing, and C is not an object-oriented language, even though you can write object-oriented code in C. You can. You don't have to. You can. But despite all those deficiencies, we have chosen C time and time and time again, and we continue to choose it. It is a huge systems language. Linux, the entire kernel is in C. Android, the entire kernel is in C. All the BSD kernels, NetBSD, OpenBSD, many of you have BSD products on your lap right now. I see at least 2 people with BSD products on their laps, right? These are important products I'm presenting to you with a BSD product written, implemented much in C.
And your iPhone as
well. And my iPhone as well. Much of the embedded firmware that drives all of our devices, the airplane that you came here in, the car that you came here in, they run embedded operating systems, they run commercial or open source kernels like Ecos, VxWorks, ThreadX, they run embedded firmware, they run device drivers, they run real-time kernels. Guess what language they're all implemented in? All of them are implemented in C, all of them. That notwithstanding, I will acknowledge, C++, Objective-C, and Java are very, very important, very major systems programming languages. C++ is used widely all through Microsoft Windows. Objective-C, very widely used in Mac OS, very, very deeply penetrated. And Java is the implementation language for the entire Android framework. So you are also carrying on your lap or in your pocket or on your desk or on your wall C++, Objective-C, and Java devices. So I don't want to minimize their value and their importance. But those same devices also run C. All throughout. How did this happen? Why did we take a deficient language and allow it to penetrate so deeply into our lives? I'm wearing a C device. I don't know how many people here have a Fitbit or something like that. I even wear my C. So C software today. Who is using C firmware right now? Raise your hand if you're using C firmware. Everybody should be raising your hand. You're all using C firmware right now. Every single person in this room, on your Nest, on your phone, on your laptop, on your output, on your router, or your access point at home, your thermostat. Any of you have a thermostat that has C code in it? Probably most of you have thermostats with C code in it. Your laptops, your TVs are full of C code. Your cars are full of C code. You've got C code running through your veins. Okay, we've all got C code all through our homes and all through our houses and on our walls. I don't know how much C code there is on this desk in front of me, but it's a lot, certainly millions of lines. Well, guess what? It's really, really easy to make mistakes in C code. It's really easy. And an industry has arisen helping us make fewer mistakes. We have commercial products from Silicon Valley startups, Coverity and Clockwork. And these companies now offer products that they sell to companies that are doing C code and C++ code and Java code, because these are not all problems that are unique to C. And these commercial products, commercially successful and profitable products now, are helping companies do a better job. I have one case study here from a major software company that uses Coverity to catch their software engineers' defects, and that tracks meticulously how many defects Coverity is finding and the classifications of those defects. The classifications mean, major means it could cause a symptom. Somebody could see a problem in some case because of that defect. Minor means you cannot see a defect, but the code could be better. It could be tighter, it could be smaller, it could be faster, could have less redundancy. And other means like it's a false report, or I did that on purpose, the tool doesn't understand what I'm doing. And these tools are finding, look at these percentages that are major. These are big numbers. These are big, big numbers of material, possibly symptomatic defects. So there are a lot of, blue screen, right? Who's had a blue screen? Guess what? This is where it's coming from. All right, so now let me relate this to Professor Pohl's research from 1987. Point number one on the list of his topics that I just presented to you was the interchangeability between pointers and integers and the very weak typing of C. Well, guess what? This is a code review from about 60 days ago. This is presented in a tool called ReviewBoard. ReviewBoard is an open source, exceptionally great, I cannot say enough good things about it. It is a great, great code review tool. And in this review board, you see a software engineer wrote some C code and he used an int. And in February, another software engineer came along and changed it to a void star. What was going on? This code worked fine. It was fine, it was perfect, no problems, as long as you were on a 32-bit system. The minute you run this code on a 64-bit system, like most of our systems now, it blows up. And so some other engineer had to come along and change that int, change that assumption to a void star. Our software engineers continue to naively introduce defects by mixing pointers and integers, right? It is still a problem today, just as much as it was 28 years ago when Professor Pohl pointed out this is a problem. It is still a problem. It makes me pull my hair out. Number two on Ira's list was that the preprocessor is a weak, primitive, not very high quality tool for accomplishing named constants and tight, lean functions. These are macros from a commercially available system implementation today, and all of these macros will fail in the presence of side effects. Guess what? Our systems have lots of side effects. Go touch a hardware register. You change the state of the system. You introduce delay. You affect performance. Auto-increment, auto-decrement operators affect global variables, right? Our code is littered with macros that fail in the presence of side effects, and we use side effects. So this is a significant source of risk, especially because a lot of people do software who are not necessarily trained software engineers. And I don't want to say anything bad about electrical engineers, but they shouldn't be writing software. Statement type limitations. Ira pointed out that the switch statement in C is a weak, primitive, unstructured concept. Guess what? This is a report from Coverity. I talked with you just a few minutes about this very, very good industry quality tool called Coverity. Well, Coverity here is saying, you forgot your break statement. How difficult is it to write a break statement? Well, apparently it's too difficult because we often don't remember. This is, again, true code, live code, from a commercially successful system. All right, fourth item on Ira's list was that arrays in C are not very, shall we say, rigorous. And in fact, they're not. So again, this is another example of a covariety defect, where in this code, a person acting like a software engineer had declared do I have a pointer? Had declared a variable with 16 items and had run their for loop from 0 to less than 17. Guess what? That's not quite right. And covariety had done a really good job. Again, also for the software engineering community, I cannot say enough good things about covariety. I am a true believer. But covariety did find that this right here will crash. And there are better mechanisms available to us right now today in our arsenal that we are not using. Iterators. Iterators solves this problem reliably, methodically, cleanly, beautifully, but we're not using them. Okay, so plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I hope I have showed you that 28 years ago, there were a lot of problems in the software engineering community, and Ira was well aware of them, and we have not really learned our lesson. Raise your hand if you have C code in your pocket. Everybody raises their hand. What's going on here? C still remains the dominant systems programming language for low-level firmware, for kernel implementations, for operating systems, for device drivers, because it is transparent, it is simple, it is portable, and it allows us to write efficient code, right? Its qualities are true, and I firmly believe in those qualities. I don't want you to take away from this presentation that I don't like C. I love C. I'm one of the people who's contributing to these problems that I'm relating to you because I keep my staff on C because I think C is the right tool, but we have to supplement C because of the defects that Ira has pointed out with tools like covariety that will allow us to do a better job. So that is what we're doing. I will actually say that I think some of us in industry have learned the lesson that Ira was trying to teach. That lesson did not necessarily lead us away from C, but it did lead us to supplement C with tools like covariety and clockwork so that we can do a better job and bring high-quality products to market. Because I do believe in bringing high-quality products to market, and I think C is a great tool for doing so, despite the truth in Ira's research. So this is one of the things that has not changed. Ira's criticisms are all true; they have not changed, but that is not the only thing that has not changed. There is also something else that over the course of 28 years, despite all the changes in the world, has not changed. Number two, in 1992, from 2014, Ira more, Daniel less. That has not changed. It probably won't change. You know what it is? Air. No change. I do want to just say that I am deeply indebted to Ira for many years of tutelage and for helping me find my path through the world. So thank you very much, Ira. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Daniel. Our next speaker is Martin Hellman, Professor Emeritus of Electrical Engineering at Stanford University.
That's good, thanks. That's good. Well, thank you. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be here to honor my longtime friend and colleague Ira Pohl and his many contributions to UC Santa Cruz and to education and the world. So I'm going to start with a personal story. Oh, I'm also going to set my timer up to make sure that I stay on schedule. Hold on a second. Clock. Here we go. Start it. I'm going to start with a personal story. Back in 1977, 1978, Ira was on sabbatical at Stanford, and we several times did bike rides through the foothills, which explains Ellis's bike injury. And actually, I got one about 10 days ago we were talking about. So it must be something to do with your this event that's causing all your friends to have bike accidents. But this was 1977. We're riding through the foothills, and a little bit of background. The data encryption standard had been promulgated in 1975, roughly 2 years before, and Whit Diffie and I had determined that the key size was not adequate. It had a 56-bit key size, which is kind of a strange number to begin with in computer science anyway, but it looked like it was 64 bits, but they threw 8 bits away because they were parity bits, but they shouldn't have done that. Anyway, we pretty quickly realized over 6 months, that this was not a mistake, that this was actually a planned bug, because NSA didn't want a publicly available crypto system that they couldn't break. And 56 bits allowed them to break it, but almost nobody else, because you had to spend about $20 million building a special purpose machine to do it. And you had to have enough traffic to keep it fully occupied. And so we've been looking at exhaustive search. Now, 2 to the 56, which is the number of keys, is roughly 100,000 million keys, which sounds like a horrendous number. But it turns out we estimated that a special purpose computer could break that even in 1975 technology, and especially in 1977 technology, for about $10,000. And the rough way it comes about is we figured you could design a chip to search 1 million keys a second. That was not unreasonable. You then buy 1 million of these chips. They're searching 1 million keys per second. So how long does it take to search the 100,000 million keys? 100,000 seconds, which is roughly a day. And so that's where the problem came about. And even if we were wrong in our estimate, we knew we weren't off by as much as an order of magnitude, by a factor of 10. But even if we were, Moore's law would erase that in a period of 5 years. The cost of computing had been falling, and this even predates integrated circuits and what's called Moore's law. The cost of computing had been falling about a factor of 10 every 5 years. That's just tremendous. I mean, I'm a little over 65 years old. That's 13 periods of 5 years. That's 10 to the 13th. That's 10 trillion. The computation you can do today for $1 would have cost roughly trillions of dollars in the year I was born, 1945. Now, NBS and indirectly NSA were saying, NBS is now NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, was saying we were off by at least 4 orders of magnitude, which was just absolutely wrong. There's a big fight going on, but I'm not going to go into that. So back to the bike ride. Ira is a very good chess player, as has been pointed out. And I'm not a good chess player at all. But these chess playing machines had just come out. You could buy them for $50 or $100 in 1977. And I asked Ira on this bike ride, are they any good? And he said, well, they're okay for a beginner to learn the basic moves, but not for a serious player. That then led, though, to his telling me about a bet that had been made in 1968 and was coming due 10 years later, 1978, a year from our bike ride. International chess master David Levy, who also does some work in AI, had bet 4 of the big names in artificial intelligence, 2 of them were Minsky and Papert, that they would not have a computer within 10 years, 1978, and a program that could beat him. And so the bet was coming due next year. And so I asked Ira on this bike ride what was going to happen. He said, the human will win. That's no question about that. But he felt that the human, David Levy, would be challenged on at least 1 game. And that was a little bit of a surprise, given where things were 10 years before when that was out of the question. So and in fact, Ira was right. The final 6-game match that took place in 1978, the computer won 1 game out of the 6, and it drew 1 out of the 6. So it lost 4.5 to 1.5, but it didn't lose 6-0. And so I asked Ira, even before the match took place, I said, how much of this expected improvement is due to increased machine speed? Because I was paying all this attention to searching 100,000 million keys, and how much of it was due to improved algorithms? And Ira said, in the 10 years, how much had machine speed increased? Factor of 100, because it was 2 periods of 5 years, 2 factors of 10. And a factor of 100 sounds like a big number until you think in terms of chess, because that's only 1.5 plies or 1.5 moves. And Ira told me the chess world didn't think that would make that much of a difference. But in reality, he said most of the improvement in the 10 years had come from brute force, increased machine speed, and very little had come from improved algorithms. Maybe 75-25 if you could put numbers on it at all. So this then led me to a question I asked Ira. I said, might it be that some artificial intelligence problems, because back then optical character recognition, even for zip codes, was in its infancy, if I remember, much less for recognizing, whole books, as Google has done with libraries. I said, might it be that there's some critical threshold in machine speed below which some of these AI problems are just not doable, and once you get there, they become easy? Well, I forget what the answer, if any, that we came up with on this bike ride was, but in preparing this talk, I decided I should go back and revisit that question. So I tried calling Ira 2 nights ago when I was making up the talk, but he was away somewhere else. So I got Ed Feigenbaum, who's a colleague and friend of mine. And hold on a second, I want to dismiss this. Go back to this. So I called Ed, and he said, funny you should ask. Oh, by the way, Ed is one of the giants in artificial intelligence. He's sometimes called the father of knowledge-based systems. And that's putting a lot of emphasis on algorithms, not on machine speed. And so Ed said, so I asked him how much things had progressed in the almost 40 years since our bike ride. And Ed said, funny you should ask. Hold on a second. And then I got an almost 1-hour private lecture from Ed on this whole question, which has been occupying his interest. The quick summary is the man who's often called the father of knowledge-based systems, Ed Feigenbaum, told me that he's now saying, and has been saying for some years, it's time to explore the other end of the spectrum. And I read that quote back to him to make sure I got it right, and he said, yes, you got it right. And so that's what Ed is now saying. He gave me an example. In 1997, so 19 years after the David Levy bet, 20 years after our infamous bike ride, the world chess champion Garry Kasparov was defeated by Deep Blue. And in one of the moves, Ed told me, and you could, I don't know this, but this is, he said, one of the moves just took the breath away from the chess experts, the grandmasters, who were watching this. It was a really creative move that no human being ever would have come up with. Does that sound about right? Did I get it right? And the interesting thing was, Ed told me, Deep Blue used improved algorithms. Almost all of its power came from brute force speed. Now, they'd gone to special purpose hardware, they'd gone to a high degree of parallelism, but brute force speed. And Ed was saying both in the phone call to me, and he says he's been saying this more generally, that we need to be looking at that other side of the spectrum, and he thinks there's a lot to be done there. So now let me turn to the main part of my talk, which is NSA surveillance, boon or bane. Is it a good thing or a bad thing that NSA is watching us? Now, this is also connected to Ira through his strong concern, as exemplified by this scholarship that's been set up. He told me last night that it's for students concerned with societal implications of technology. And so this, again, is very much connected to Ira. So in some ways, I was the Edward Snowden of 35 plus years ago. Now, there was a difference. Snowden took classified information and divulged it. The difference was I and my colleagues, Whit Diffie, Ralph Merkel, Ravesh Shamir Edelman at MIT later, were coming up with research results that NSA said were born classified. In other words, even though we had no benefit of classified knowledge in coming up with them, the work should be classified because of its national security implications. And I already went through the 100,000 million keys. There were some other things like that. I saw myself to some extent as Luke Skywalker. Now remember, I was, 1977, I was 32 years old instead of 68 years old, so I could pretend I was Luke Skywalker. And NSA was Darth Vader. Of course, that makes it my father. Now, I see it differently today, but when you're 32, you see the world a little differently. And also, I'm still married. I had to learn to see that just because after 47 years, and you have to learn to recognize that just because you convince someone else is at fault, it doesn't mean they are, that you often play a part in this too. Now, I had made myself the self-appointed security officer for the public, because there was nobody doing that at this time. There were very few, almost nobody in the unclassified world knew much about cryptography. And so like this 100,000 million keys being inadequate was something that very few people would recognize. Now, we knew NSA was very unhappy with this. And they never said it directly, but there were threats we'd be thrown in jail. Some of my friends who worked in the intelligence community said, you should watch out for your physical safety as well. My wife was really happy when it became big news. She said, now if something happens to you, there will be an investigation at least. And so it's less likely. And because it wasn't just NSA I was pissing off the KGB and a few other intelligence agencies as well. And so in July 1977, so actually a few months after our bike ride probably, I get a letter in the mail from the IEEE. It's a response to a letter that had been sent to them by an IEEE member, J.A. Meyer, from his home address in Maryland, which immediately raises certain flags for those of us watching NSA, which is at Fort Meade, Maryland. And Meyer, in his letter, said he was very concerned as an IEEE member that the IEEE was breaking the law by publishing papers that were in violation of the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, or ITAR. It's illegal to export an F-16. That makes good sense. You want to make sure it's not going to someplace we don't want it to go. It's illegal to export the plans for an F-16 because that tells them how to do the same thing. Well, the ITAR defined anything cryptographic as an implement of war. So my papers, which were being published in the IEEE transactions, which were being exported because they went internationally, were a violation of the ITAR, according to Meyer. And the IEEE wrote back to Meyer saying they were well aware of the ITAR, but it's always been their position that they cannot be the gatekeeper. It's the responsibility of the authors and their institutions to make sure they're not in violation of the ITAR. And they sent a copy to me, not as Martin Hellman troublemaker. Oh, Meyer listed about 6 or 7 journal issues of the IEEE that he felt violated the ITAR, never mentioning me by name, but I had an article in every one except one. People start talking in code when you get into cryptography. It's kind of interesting. So Meyer did it. He didn't say Hellman's papers. The IEEE didn't send it to me as Martin Hellman troublemaker. They sent it to me because I was on the board of governors of one of these IEEE groups. That was the Information Theory Group, now Information Theory Society, that was publishing these papers. But they didn't send it to all the governors. And so I took it to John Schwartz, who was then Stanford's general counsel, for 2 reasons. First, Stanford was potentially liable. The authors and their institutions were responsible. But secondly, I was worried that if I was prosecuted, I wanted to make sure I had the financial backing of the university, because you can bankrupt yourself with these legal fees. So I left the letter off with Schwartz, and a couple of days later came back after he'd had a chance to review it. And this is a momentous meeting in my mind. I'll never forget it. He says, it's my legal opinion that if the ITAR are construed as that broadly that it would cover your work, then they're unconstitutional because it violates freedom of speech, freedom of the press, things like that. But he warned me. So he said, if you're prosecuted, the university will defend you. If you're convicted, we'll appeal. But I've got to warn you, if all appeals are exhausted, we obviously cannot go to jail for you. And it was 2 years. He said we also can't even at that point pay a fine because then it's criminal conduct if all appeals have been exhausted. He also recommended, this was July 77, October 77, the Information Theory Symposium was coming up at Cornell University in Ithaca, and I had 2 papers with students, Ralph Merkel and Steve Pohl. And John Schwartz strongly recommended that I give the papers rather than the students because if the students were prosecuted for giving them, it wasn't clear the university could defend them, but I was an employee, an agent of the university. Also, Schwartz pointed out that a newly minted PhD would have trouble finding a job if there was a multi-year court case, whereas I was a tenured professor at that point. I gave the students the option. I told them I'm comfortable either way now that I have the university's backing. They initially said very courageously that they didn't care, they would still give the papers, but a week later they both come back. Their parents had really gotten concerned and were beating on them, and they said, get our parents off our backs, go ahead and give the paper. So at the conference, I wanted the students to get the credit they deserved, and so when it was time for the papers to be given, I went up with each student in turn, and everybody knew what was going on, and so I didn't have to explain the whole thing. I said, on the basis of legal counsel, even though Steve Pohl or Ralph Merkel, as the case was, even though they would normally be giving the paper, on the advice of Stanford's counsel, they will not, but I want them to get the credit they deserve. So even though all the words will be coming from me, please consider it from every point of view except legally as if they're coming from Steve or Ralph. And of course, the students got more credit, more attention than they ever would have gotten without this. And fortunately, we were not arrested. Phil Zimmerman did have charges brought against him for PGP a bit later on similar circumstances. Now, why do we need to worry about cryptography? Well, there's tremendous potential for abuse. First of all, we look at how Richard Nixon used his enemies list. Of course, JFK had his own enemies list, and you misused the IRS and misused the wiretapping of the FBI. And I actually have a wonderful little story, but I'm going to leave it out for lack of time if there's time later, in which Kennedy admits to all these things in a great joke. But he was just like Nixon in many ways. And so to some extent, the Republicans are correct that Nixon was the only one to get caught. And he was just doing what had been done by others. I think he went beyond. But the real danger is as we move from paper-based communications to computer-based communications, the problem becomes a lot worse. Remember Moore's Law, a factor of 10 every 5 years. I did a very rough calculation that if information is in computer-readable form and not encrypted, you can search roughly 10 to the 15th words for $1. 1,000 trillion petaword for $1. Just go through it. You can search about 1 billion per second on what's the lifetime of a computer, and do you really need a computer? And it turns out maybe it's 10 to the 12th, maybe it's 10 to the 18th, but it's somewhere around 10 to the 15th. It's just unbelievably cheap. So you need encryption. Now, there's a question here, though. Who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? Usually, if you look at Mad Magazine, the good guys are the ones trying to protect their communication and the bad guy is the one trying to eavesdrop. Now, that's usually true, but if it's Al-Qaeda who's communicating and NSA that's listening in, then I think we would all agree the roles are reversed. And in fact, right after September 11th, think back to that. How did you feel about government intrusion in your lives? I remember thinking and even saying at the time, I want my government to be more intrusive in my life. Now, I think I overreacted, but I think most of us did. And we got what we asked for. We got the Patriot Act, we got extensions of it. So this is not, it's important when looking at this not to demonize NSA. Yes, they've made some mistakes, we all make mistakes, but really the fundamental problem here, Pogo said it really well. We have met the enemy and he is us. And so if we want it different, we're going to have to recognize that there are trade-offs. And so in particular, let's get beyond the current meme, which is NSA bad for snooping on us. Imagine New York goes up in smoke tomorrow in a nuclear terrorist attack. It's not a likely event, but it's not an unlikely event. People like Henry Kissinger, Dick Garwin, national security experts, former secretaries of defense in a poll, all came out to an order of magnitude. The risk of a nuclear terrorist event in the United States is on the order of 10% a year. We have roughly a 10-year time horizon. It's not 1% a year. At our current path, if we don't start taking this issue more seriously, we're not going to last 100 years without having a nuclear terrorist event. And it's not a 1-year time horizon. It's roughly a 10-year time horizon. If that happens, if it's New York, or even more if it's San Francisco, fortunately you guys are relatively safe here in Santa Cruz, you're not a concentrated target. People, instead of saying, why was NSA snooping on us? They'll wonder, who were those idiots that were trying to prevent NSA and in fact prevented NSA from snooping to the amount they needed to prevent it? So we need to recognize that there are trade-offs. I'm not arguing NSA should do anything it wants, but we need to recognize it's not the simplistic problem we often make it out to be. So what do we need to do? We need to think about these things more and not just go with our gut level feel. We need to think the trade-offs through more carefully. And we need to think through about the need for more oversight. In a discussion with a man who had major positions in the intelligence community until recently, he maintains that of Snowden's revelations, the ones that are important all were unclassified. He didn't have to reveal all the classified stuff to get the most important ones. I haven't looked into that, but if he's right, then that says something, and it puts Snowden's revelations in a different light. One of the revelations that I had not looked into before that I think is really important is we have a single point failure with the FISA court. One man, and it is a man, appoints all the new FISA court judges when vacancies come up. It's the Chief Justice Roberts of the Supreme Court. That's a really dangerous situation, needs to be changed. We need to be thinking about these things even without the revelations. We also need to think, why are we a target for terrorists? Why do we have to worry about a nuclear terrorist incident in New York or San Francisco? Now, President Bush said it's because they hate our freedoms. I don't think that's the reason. At least that's certainly not the reason they've put forth, and it doesn't make a lot of sense logically. Our civil liberties, I would maintain, are collateral damage to our war on terror, which in turn was necessitated by our wanting to use our military as much as we do anywhere in the world, anytime, any place we want. War and democracy are incompatible. We need to recognize that. And so we've got to choose. Do we want to be in a national security state where our civil liberties will be limited, or would we like to dial back a bit? And if we dial back, it's not going to happen immediately. The threats will still be out there. The fundamental problem is we want it all, that we, the American public. We want our privacy, our civil liberties. We want our physical security from terrorist attack. And we want unfettered use, not you and I specifically, but the American public wants to use our military anytime, any place, whether it's in our interests or not. I mean, think about where we've used our military recently and whether it's ended up good or bad. Iraq, no al-Qaeda under Saddam Hussein. Now there's al-Qaeda. Iraq was countering Iran under Saddam Hussein. Now, under democracy, they have a Shiite government, which is cozying up, understandably, to the leader of the Shiite world, Iran. Libya, we helped kill Gaddafi. No al-Qaeda in Libya prior to that. Now we have al-Qaeda not only in Libya, but spilling over into Mali. So we need to look at these trade-offs, and we need to grow up and face the fact that there are trade-offs, that we can't have everything that we think we want, and some of the things we want we really don't want if we look at them more carefully. So in ending, I'd like to return to the personal side. That's kind of the end of the talk. I want to return to the personal side and thank Ira for his friendship over the years, for his many contributions to the 10,000 or 50,000 students, with the last 40,000 being in the last few years. He's contributed to educating. And I'd also like to thank him for his concern for the societal implications of technology and the fact that this scholarship that has been established in your and Kate's honor is going to students concerned with societal implications of technology. We need more of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Our next speaker is Paul Rosenblum, Professor of Computer Science at the University of Southern California. Paul is the Director of Cognitive Architectures at UCSC's Institute for Creative Technologies. He's co-director of the SOAR project, a cognitive architecture to support general intelligence spanning research areas including machine learning, problem solving, multi-agent systems, virtual humans, and cognitive modeling. He's recently published a new book, On Computing, the Fourth Great Scientific Domain. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes. Let me just,
Just be able to,
did you pull that out? Or
yeah,
do it the
just
other
try
way?
it like this.
Timing questions. So I was asked to take a half hour, but there are 3 speakers listed after me, all before 12 o'clock, which is
Yeah.
25 minutes away.
Where's Heidi? Are you comfortable in squeezing a little bit shorter?
If you just tell me how much time
Say
I should take.
20?
20? I'll see what I can do.
Okay, great.
I'll abbreviate some things.
All right, and let me get you on here. You want to go into full screen mode there. Oh, okay. Where's the feedback coming from? I'm not sure we just moved this over to here. Is there still something? Or- Where's the audio? Here it is. Oh, that needs to, got it.
That's the sound, but we're not appearing on screen. That plugs in over here. I probably won't have time to show the video that uses sound, but
Why don't you go with your normal timing?
okay.
And then how do we get
Feedback coming.
So, but we're not on the screen.
Yeah, how come his isn't syncing up to?
Has this laptop been connected to any other projector before?
Has it been,
Connected to any other projector before?
not today, but many projectors over the years?
See the display.
It's always worked.
Okay, so it looks like it's just not being detected. Oh. There we go.
Yeah, much better.
Okay.
Do we need to do anything here?
No, it's
Hold on,
still
this is the
not
laptop
showing.
out. There we go.
Okay.
So. It's right there.
Don't
Check that.
Yeah.
I don't really want to mirror.
Oh, you don't want a mirror?
But
Right,
we
you have a
see it here
presentation.
and there.
Well, normally one would be one here.
Yeah, you have it set up the way you wanted it. Yeah. So just go ahead, just go back to PowerPoint and just start it.
Okay.
It's feedback coming from somewhere.
There we go. Okay. So I should stay here with the mic, or?
And that would-
Do you need to plug this in or no? Do you have sound?
No, I'm not going to do that. Okay. Sorry about the delay. So the original title for this talk was 4 Brushes with Ira Pohl. The idea was to actually talk about 4 points of interaction I've had with Ira over something like 33 years. Ira's not here? There he is.
Great.
And those have actually happened, they've happened over 33 years, and they're a mixture of professional and personal points of contact. And in fact, 2 of them happened before I ever met Ira. I only met him within the last decade or so. So that's the first part of the talk, and I'll get into the book that was mentioned as part of that. I was also asked to say a few words about a new approach to cognitive architectures I've been working on, with the thought that some of the folks who work in games here and perhaps other things would be interested in that as well. So I will talk about that too. This talk is both personal and professional. You can see, in fact, my professional affiliations were mentioned. I'm a professor of computer science, specializing in AI and cognitive science, but I'm also Ira's brother-in-law and Kate's brother. So I'm going to bring in some of those kinds of things as well as we go along. So here's the first point of contact. This goes back to 1981, so just 33 years ago. Part of my misspent youth as a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon University, when I wasn't able to make progress on my thesis, I worked on a program to play the game of Othello. It was actually first written in C, but later in the Stanford AI language, SAIL. So there was this Othello tournament coming up for programs in Santa Cruz in early 1981, and I wanted my program to be able to compete, but I couldn't get across country. So fortunately, my sister Kate lived here in Santa Cruz, and so she ran it remotely. She was here on a terminal, and over the ARPANET, for those of you who remember it, the predecessor to the internet, connected to our giant KL10 computer at Carnegie Mellon. It was a room-sized computer, but it ran at about 1 million instructions per second, and it had about 4 megabytes of memory on it. That was the big computer shared by the department. So, and that gave me an advantage of the other participants. There were 18 other participants. My program won. I got my first journal article out of it. That was all good. What was particularly interesting about this from the perspective of this Festschrift is that it's when Ira almost met Kate. So as you've heard, Ira's very big on games. He's a master chess player and so on. So he dropped by this tournament, and I guess they didn't formally meet, but Kate recognized him because, in fact, he was her first husband's favorite computer science professor here at Santa Cruz. So it was premature for them to really get together. So that was the first point of contact. Here's the second point of contact. So this is a few years later. I'm an assistant professor at Stanford in computer science and psychology. For some reason, I'm asked to write a paper on best first search or an article for the Encyclopedia of Artificial Intelligence. I never quite figured out why, but I did go ahead and write the paper. So that's me. If you look down here, you can see that the paper after was by Ira Pohl on bidirectional search. Now, there was no question as to why that was appropriate because Ira pretty much had invented bidirectional search. The other odd point is if you look at the article just before mine, it's by Rich Korf, who's going to be talking this afternoon, in fact, relating current work on search, I believe, to what Ira did early on. Turns out that Rich and I were also grad students together at CMU, and our sons went to middle school together in LA. All these weird connections. Okay, that's point number 2. Third one. So Ira and Kate finally met, they fell in love, they got married. I met Ira as part of that whole process, an incidental part of it, of course. And this is, I think, a picture. This was probably Victoria recently, the two of them together, happy. I'll talk a little bit more about this later. But so that's why I'm her brother and his brother-in-law. Fourth point. So also back in 1981, Ira decided that computer science should be taught differently than it was, particularly an introduction to it. So he wrote this book, The Nature of Computation, An Introduction to Computer Science. Now, this is a table of contents I found online. If anyone has good enough eyes, they can see that Ira didn't talk about Turing machines, but he talked about Turing machines. So I assumed there was something like this in there. Of course, there are Turing machines named for Alan Turing. Here's another quote I found online. In 1981, Ira's book with Alan Shaw was pioneering in taking the view that basic CS should be, I can't read it here, analogous to other basic science courses, studying the whole field rather than being a programming course. Now that's a message I've really taken to heart with a book I wrote roughly 30 years later on computing the fourth grade scientific domain. It said not only should it be taught as a basic science, it actually is a basic science. Ira was very supportive in the writing of that. In fact, he wrote this wonderful blurb that goes on the back of the book, comparing it to string theory as kind of a unifying theory for computing. I think he overstated a little bit, but I very much appreciated the comment. So what I'm going to do in the next few slides is just give you an idea of what the major argument is in this book. It's of course missing all of the details. But the idea is to look on computing as whole. And I'm using the term computing rather than computer science because we're talking about the big picture. So it's computer science and engineering. It's information science and technology. It's computational science, informatics, all the different parts that computing is involved in. But it's not just academic, it's also industrial. It's both the science and the engineering of it. Some people think computer science is a science, some say it's an engineering. It's really a combination of the two. Both the kind of the core parts, the interdisciplinary parts, with the idea of stimulating thinking about the discipline as a whole. Now, I wanted to talk about the nature of computing, its scope, what kind of a field it is, what its structure is, what its role is in the science, and what its stature is or should be with respect to the other scientific domains. And basically to contribute to an ongoing conversation in computing about what really the field is all about. So here's what computing isn't. So it's not just hardware or computers. It's not just programming, which unfortunately too many of our students think it's all about. It's not just calculation, which too many scientists think it's about. It's not just applications, which too much of the general public thinks it's about. And it's not even just formal principles or theory about computing. It's in some sense all of this and more. It's also not a long list of random topics, I got this list off of a website of one of our leading computer science departments. They'll remain nameless unless you want me to name names. This is essentially all the things they do research on in computing. It's hard to get a feeling for what the field is from a list like that. So let's talk about what computing is. Here's kind of the top level thesis in the book. And it's hype, but it's important hype. So computing is an exciting and diverse, yet remarkably coherent, highly multidisciplinary, but with unique core, great scientific domain, that's a term I invented, which I'll explain to you, with a future that promises to be as rich and momentous as its revolutionary past has already been. That's the high order bit, okay? So what are we talking about here? So we started with those initial lists, but here's just sort of a quick example of some of the things that are computing that you might not think about when you think about kind of academic computer science. So it is robots capable of constructing houses automatically. This is a scale-up of 3D prototyping that extrudes concrete and can build walls automatically. It is clothing that senses and communicates emotions. It is a deep intermingling of the real and virtual worlds in a variety of different kinds of environments. It's quantum computers of heretofore unconceivable power. Monkeys controlling robot arms by pure thought. Technology-enabled superhuman intelligence of various sorts. And even the potential computational basis of the universe. The idea being that, in fact, if you look under physics, you're going to find computing. And more. That's all part of what we want to talk about when we're talking about computing. So here's great scientific domains, which I'm saying computing is one. Here's kind of the three normal things. So you're familiar with the physical sciences, the life sciences, the social sciences. Everyone knows what those are. But why are those three things? Why aren't there other of them? What is it about them that makes them something special? So I coined the term great scientific domain, and these are kind of the top three. But then I tried to analyze, based on looking at these and based on looking at computing, what makes these great scientific domains, and could computing be one of those? There's a little bit of circularity, but I'm going to ignore that for now. So we looked at both of those, and I came up with at least a preliminary definition that's on the order of the understanding and shaping, with understanding sort of like science, shaping sort of like engineering, of a significant body of distinct interactions among structures and processes, both natural and artificial. Now, there's a lot of detail compressed in there. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this piece because it's one of the key pieces here. So let's talk about interactions among structures and processes. So structures are things of interest. In the physical domain, they're things like atoms and planets, life domain, cells and organs, social domain, things like people and groups. Processes alter structures over time. Forces and reactions, procreation, evolution, cognition, behavior. So what's important about these is that the interactions among the structures and processes yield the dynamic richness that characterizes great scientific domains. That's what I'm going to say is sort of the key aspect of them. There are scientific studies which are static or structural. They don't have the processes interacting with them. Mathematics, for example, is largely structural. The humanities are largely structural and static. The key thing is that if it's a structural domain, you can largely get by with analysis because you don't have these complex dynamics going on. When you have the rich dynamics, you need experimentation. So it turns out, according to this analysis, experiments do not signify science. There's lots of science that isn't experimental, but they signify a great scientific domain because of the richness of the interactions. And so that turned out to be key in what we're talking about here. So let's talk about computing. So we talked about structures and processes. In computing, it's information. So we talked about information theory, for example. Information is central to computing, but its transformation is also key. Not just measuring the amount of information, but how we transform information in all sorts of rich, Turing-compatible ways. So computing as a domain involves information and its transformation, whether it's on the small scale with data structures and algorithms operating on them, whether it's large-scale complex computing systems of various sorts, or whether it's an AI system that tries to model the mind. It all involves transformation of information. So where does computing fit? Well, the three existing domains, there's the physical, which has non-living objects and forces that operate on them, the life domain, living objects, with the various kinds of processes on them, the social domain, people and their products, and the processes there. If you think about information and its transformation, it doesn't belong to any of those domains. So what does that mean? Well, it could mean that, this is my Turing machine, I grabbed that off the net, that computing isn't a science, so it doesn't matter, or that it's just engineering, or just engineering science, which is science done in service of engineering. Or it could mean that computing is its own great scientific domain, the fourth one, according to the analysis. Not surprisingly, the bottom line here is that computing is the fourth great scientific domain. And with all the implications of that in terms of what it means for there to be the physical, the life, the social, and the computing sciences. If you want the details, I've got longer talks on that. There's the book as well that was mentioned. The one other bit I just want to say about this is you can take this notion farther, and if you have these four great scientific domains, you can start looking at the interactions among those domains, getting into highly multidisciplinary science. If you do that with a focus just on computing, one of the things you can get out of this is this 2D table, which shows what kind of domain computing is interacting with, physical, life, social, or itself, and the nature of the interaction. These are implementation, these are interaction, I can't go into detail, but you can get an interesting map of much of what's gone on in computing for the last few decades in terms of which domains computing is interacting with and the nature of that interaction. Again, details are beyond this. Okay, that's that topic. So I have a few minutes left. The other topic I wanted to talk about is the Sigma cognitive architecture. So what is that? And in fact, what's a cognitive architecture? A cognitive architecture is a hypothesis about the fixed structure underlying the mind. It includes what are the basic mechanisms for things like memory and reasoning and learning and interaction? And how do those all work together so that you get intelligent behavior coming out when you combine it with skills and knowledge that are either put in by hand or learned? So we have the notion, you can think of yourself when you're born, you have a cognitive architecture, you have a mind, but you don't have any skills or knowledge other than things that have been essentially inherited from because of evolutionary processes. Through your life, you acquire those skills and processes together with the architecture, they determine how you behave. Once you have a cognitive architecture, you can use it in a variety of ways. One way is as part of a unified theory of human cognition. So this book was by Alan Newell, my advisor and collaborator for many years, providing one of the first attempts to really create such a theory based on SOAR, which was mentioned. Actually, I was co-director of SOAR for about 15 years, but I haven't worked on it for the last 15 years. John Laird, who also worked with me at Michigan, is still working on SOAR. But this is all based on SOAR. So unified theory of cognition, you can build intelligent agents of various sorts. This was part of a military simulation we did in the 90s, intelligent robots. Or you can use them as the minds of virtual humans, which is what we do at the Institute for Creative Technologies and why I'm doing research on that now. Here is, in fact, no, I probably shouldn't. Do we have the time to show a short video of a virtual human? Okay. So these are examples of virtual humans that have been built at ICT. As I mentioned, this one's based on SOAR. These are based on other things. This is twin tour guides at the Boston Museum of Science, named Ada and Grace. Computer scientists should recognize those names. This is a mixed reality entertainment environment in kind of an Old West saloon. This is an environment for teaching people how to counsel military personnel. This is a Navy version of it. And this is an environment for training people to do multi-party cross-cultural negotiation. I'm going to show you a very quick video from part of this, just to get a feeling for what some of these virtual humans can do. And hopefully it will work, and we'll have sound and everything. So this is not my work, but this is some of the work going on at ICT. There is no sound at the beginning, but...
Hello?
Okay, great.
Hello. Is there something we can help you with? Who are you? My name's Ada. And I'm Grace. We're your virtual museum guides. With your help, we can suggest exhibits that will get you thinking, or answer questions about things you may have seen here. What do you want to learn about?
What can I do up here?
Here at Computer Place, you can command a robot to do a Mars mission and program another one at Robot Park. You can remote control a robot soldier or figure out how robots climb walls. You can even make a robotic dog dance or use one to navigate a virtual world. And don't forget the one that remembers meeting you. What do you want to do first?
How do you understand what people are saying? We're virtual humans. We use speech recognition technology to identify your words and
use statistics to figure out the meaning of the words based on context. Once we know what you're talking about, we'll reply appropriately. The same way you ask a question or...
Okay, that's sort of what we have time with on that. But you can see they're quite complex simulations of people, including the bodies and the minds. They have to have emotional expressions, or they come off as creepy. They have to have gestures. They have to understand what you're saying. They have to speak back. They have to models of dialogue and how you interact. There's a lot of things that have to go into this. The minds of these at this point, at least these particular twins, are very simple. They do some fairly simple statistical calculations. These, for example, had much more complex minds. But one of the things I'm trying to do is build an architecture that will support these kinds of virtual humans and more sophisticated ones in the future. Again, focused on the minds. All right. All right. What can we do to get this to come back? That's what's beeping when I hit escape. Oh, there it did it again. Okay. Let's see if we can start it back up. Okay, great. Now this is blame Apple and Microsoft rather than C for these kinds of problems. Okay, so in the cognitive architecture I'm building, there are kind of three general desiderata. One is grand unified. So the term actually is an analogy with physics, with grand unified theories. We're not only trying to unify across cognition, things like memory and reasoning, and those kinds of things, but across what are considered normally subcognitive things, perception, action, emotions, all of those things we want integrated into the same system. Functionally elegant, broadly capable, yet simple and theoretically elegant. The idea is to have a small general set of mechanisms through whose interactions you get the breadth of intelligent behavior. So the buzz phrase I use here is cognitive Newton's laws. So I use physics analogies, though I'm not a physicist. And sufficiently efficient, so it just has to run fast enough for what you want to do. The idea is to create virtual humans, intelligent agents, intelligent robots that are cognitive. They can think creatively and flexibly, interact with both their physical and social worlds, and adapt, given their interactions and their experience with the environment. This is inherently a hybrid and a mixed problem. Hybrid means continuous and discrete information. Mixed means probabilistic and symbolic. For example, there's a new professor here at UC Santa Cruz, Elise Couture, who's very well known for her work in these kinds of areas. And we've interacted on these topics in the past, for example. Sigma is constructed in analogy to a computer system. So in a computer system, you'll have the hardware. Often you'll have microcode or a firmware architecture. The computer architecture, which provides the programming environment where you can do C and other kinds of languages. And then you build programs and services on top of that. With the cognitive system, we have, in this case, it's a language called Lisp, which replaces the hardware. We have the cognitive architecture, which is associated with the computer architecture, knowledge and skills on top of that. One of the things that's a little unique about Sigma is that it has this well-developed graphical architecture that maps onto the microcode architecture below it. The graphical architecture is based on a technique called graphical models. I'll give you one slide on it, which is probably the most technical slide in the talk, and piecewise linear functions, which I won't talk about. The processing cycle down here is to solve graphs and then modify those graphs. The cognitive architecture is built on top of them, has things like working memories, long-term memories, all those kinds of things. It gets input, it has memory access, it makes decisions, it learns, and it has output. The important thing is that memory access maps down to graph solutions, and decisions and learning both map down to graph modification. Essentially, again, for those who know, this is a melding of 3 decades worth of progress separately in graphical models and cognitive architectures. So graphical models, one very brief slide. They're about efficient computation with complex multivariate functions by taking advantage of forms of independence to decompose them into products of simpler functions. Now, the most well-known form are Bayesian networks, which take complex probabilistic functions, decompose them into products of prior and conditional probabilities, map them onto directed graphs with variable nodes, and then solve them in one form or another. There's another form called factor graphs, which are more general, which allow decomposition of arbitrary multivariate functions and decompose them into undirected graphs of variables and factors with one factor per factor up there. You then go ahead and solve these, usually by some form of message passing or sampling, a statistical process. The interesting thing is they can handle both mixed and hybrid processing. In fact, some form of neural network models map onto them as well. But what's particularly interesting from an architectural basis is that you can, from this simple, elegant base, you can get state-of-the-art algorithms that kind of cross the space of things that you want to do in building intelligent systems. And that was the intuition behind Sigma. So it uses factor graphs and a form of message passing. Here's a very simple example, a piece of what would be called semantic memory in psychology. It's what's called a classifier, a naive Bayes classifier. You give it descriptions of objects, and you want it to tell you what's the category of that object and to fill in any missing features of the object. So, for example, we have a brown dog here. If we're told that something is alive and has 4 legs, and we've learned a bunch of these things, you want to be able to predict that it's a dog, that it's brown, that it can move, and that it weighs 50 pounds, based on your experience. It's one of these naive Bayes classifiers up there. You can create a factor graph out of that. You can assign the evidence that it's alive and that it has 4 legs. You propagate messages which conjointly determine that it's a dog. Those propagate further and give you distributions on all of the other features. It's a form of probabilistic reasoning in this particular case. Another interesting bit is that you can, in fact, learn locally in this graph, paying attention to the messages that come back into the factor nodes. It's a form of local learning that's somewhat like backpropagation in neural networks, except that you don't have to do a certain phase to get the information going backwards. I'll go over this very quickly. This is something, in fact, that was inherited from SOAR. It has a nesting of control layers. The innermost one is reactivity. You see something, you react immediately to it. A lion, run. That's reactivity. That's done by essentially passing messages within the graphs and getting a solution out. That's the inner loop for a deliberative sequential process, the kind of thing you see in symbolic processing. You do step after step to do problem solving about how to do something. That's the inner loop for a reflective process, which says, oh, I'm solving a problem, but I've got a problem in my own behavior. I can't figure out how to do it. I step back and work on that problem internally. That's the outer loop, a reflective loop. And these things differ in various ways. I won't go into that, but they're kind of interesting. Here's one of the kinds of things we've done with it. This is a robot navigation task dealing with some kind of a corridor, and it has to find its way to a goal site. This is based on a complex factor graph with 3 parts. This part does vision according to a standard technique, conditional random fields, which are another form of graphical model. It does localization, finding out where it is based on looking at objects in the environment, and it does decision making by a third technique in a different subgraph, all in the service of figuring out what the next action is to perform. You can also then learn. This is a variation on that. You can try to learn, in fact, a map of the environment in terms of probabilities of objects given locations. After a little bit of learning, you get a little bit of stuff. More learning, you start to get very strong relationships where you see walls on the outer side, nothing there, and so on. That's done by that local learning algorithm. So that's the kind of thing we do with Sigma. We're trying to ask questions like, can we deal with the full range of capabilities required for human-level intelligence? Will they be sufficiently efficient because of what graphical models bring to the table? What can we gain by doing things in a functionally elegant manner in this fashion? And can we, in fact, model the human mind and eventually the brain here? We've done a whole bunch of stuff across things like memory, decision-making, learning, imagery, perception, natural language, trying to look at the consequences of these kinds of things. So that's kind of where my research is, and I kind of did that at request. To summarize, mostly I want to congratulate Ira, and I want to thank him for making Kate so happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Our next speaker is Lynn Welge. Lynn attended UC Santa Cruz in 1969 to 73, graduating in 73 from the Information Computer Science Department. Lynn will be reading a note from Professor Bill Keenman, an early ICS professor and chair, well known for compiler technology. Lynn was a student of both Ira and Bill. Welcome.
Thank you. So I'm going to be just a few minutes for everybody who's starting to get hungry. My name is Lynn Welge, and I got my degree in information and computer science in 73 here at Santa Cruz. More importantly, I was one of Ira's very first students, 1970. What I'd like to do is two things. I'm going to take Ira and the rest of us down memory lane just for a few minutes and talk about Santa Cruz in the 70s, and also deliver a message from a mutual friend. So first of all, Santa Cruz in 1970. 7 colleges, let's see, Cowell, Stevenson, Crown, Merrill, College 5, Kresge, and College 7. Under 5,000 students, and I found this in looking for stuff for this talk. This is the catalog for the entire university, fall 1972. This is it. This is it. You know, you might say, is this one college, one department? No, this is the entire Santa Cruz, UC Santa Cruz. What's fun about this is there's lots of fun things to browse through it, but it does include the cost of a quarter. So the registration cost for a quarter at Santa Cruz in 1972 was $229.50. Of course, that was for a California resident, so it was more otherwise, but some things have changed. During those days, 1970, Reagan was governor. Vietnam War was in full swing. We were all hippies, and Ira had hair out to here. Being a computer science student in 1970 at Santa Cruz was not for the faint of heart. We had a computer building, which I think was a converted garage or something. I mean, it was off by itself. It had an IBM mainframe, that was our computer, with the whole glass walls, raised floor, air conditioning, the whole shebang. We programmed with punch cards, and it was horrible, just horrible. You sit down at this little machine thing, and you type in a line of code, and it produces this, literally a punched card. And so if you had your program, you know, you're getting this stack of cards. So, and then you would take all these cards and, in their correct order, of course, and put them in these funky, you know, brown boxes that, you know, you had to take care of. And of course, heaven forbid, anything, you know, you drop them, that would be, you know, deadly. Just getting one, you know, slightly out of order. Or imagine doing editing where you had to find one of them to change because you'd made a mistake. So anyway, it was not that much fun. And you certainly don't want to drop them. Then you take this box of cards and you go up to the window and you give it to the guy behind the window, and he puts your box of cards behind some other sets of boxes of cards. And you come back, you know, 3 hours later, or whatever it was, to pick up your printout, which is, of course, the fan fold, you know, big, wide, rip off the edges kind of printer paper. So you're looking over and imagine, you know, you go through this 3 or 4 hour process and you've done a typo, you know, you've done a semicolon instead of a colon or whatever, let alone a logic problem, you know, just a simple syntax problem, and you go through the whole process again. You don't have to retype all the cards, you can just replace the one assuming, you know, you can find it. It was just, it wasn't a lot of fun. Amazing any of us sort of stuck to it. The department at that time, at least in 1970, was originally called Information Sciences. And it was pretty much a mixed bag. The cool thing, though, was that it was one of the few undergraduate CS degrees you could get in the country, probably in the world. In those days, Berkeley, any computer science going on was part of electrical engineering, so it was within the EE department. Stanford, you could only get a degree as a master's. They didn't even have an undergraduate CS degree in those days. So having stumbled on a university that actually had this field was great stroke of luck for me anyway. It was a very mixed bag of specialties in the department. a little of a few things and not so much of others, because it was a small department. That was the nice thing is, my classes would have probably under 20 people in them. Very small faculty and all very accessible. So a lot of fun in that respect. So, for example, David Huffman of fame, Huffman Coding fame, was the chair of the department in those days. And he taught, systems theory, coding theory, of course, graph theory, all this kind of fun, interesting, but sort of funky stuff. So, and those were to freshmen. So our first two recommended freshman courses were these two Huffman courses. So you go through this and you look at each other and say, you realize you've not seen a computer, you've not written a line of code, and you're like, well, this is kind of different. So that made it fun. We had professors Bill McKeeman and Frank DeReamer, whose specializations were in the area of language design, parser generators, compiler generators. And that, again, very fun, interesting courses and interesting. We had a visitor, John Warnock of University of Utah and Adobe fame. He came and actually taught a graphics class. That was really fun. And we learned to rotate a cube. Imagine that, though, without any kind of graphical user interface. It left a little something. It was, again, we didn't have any of those sorts of systems in those days. So it was a little dry, but, again, very fun. And then we had Ira, who actually taught programming. I mean, it was thank goodness at that point. We're like, oh, hooray, we're finally learning to actually program what we've heard about. Real quickly, I wanted to read, this is also just kind of for fun, the list of classes available in fall 1972 in the Information Computer Science department. There are 7 of them. There's Nature of Computation, Ira Pohl. Introduction to Computers and Programming, Frank DeReamer. Programming Linguistics, DeReamer. Graphs, Games, and Structures, Huffman. Computer Organization, McKeeman. Probabilistic Systems Analysis, Boyd. And then the graduate workshop, which was basically your thesis. That was it. That was fall 72. So we had a lot of interesting things to learn about. Somewhere before I graduated, after I started, the department went from being named Information Sciences to Information and Computer Sciences. And that was an important change, mainly because it showed both the evolution of the staff. More and more of the incoming computer science professors were more in the computer sciences side than in just the systems theory and information theory side. And also it recognized as the country was getting more and more behind and recognizing the importance of computer science as an actual field. So earlier I'd mentioned Dr. Bill McKeeman. He was one of the key faculty in the early days, very funny, loud, opinionated, charismatic man that was really fun to be with and was an excellent teacher. He was here at UC Santa Cruz for about 10 years, and he did a stint as the chairman of the department, I think before Ira did. He's not able to be here today, but asked that I read Ira a letter he wrote to you. And just so that you remember that this is Bill talking, and not me. I'm not going to leave this up in front here because I won't be able to do it all at once. But this is actually, I found this photo of Bill. It's about what he looked like in those days, I believe. You notice the big, long sideburns. It was, again, the early 70s. So this is a letter to Ira from Bill. Dear Ira, I'm truly sorry I cannot be there for your Ira-Fest. I do not fly anymore and don't contemplate driving across the country again anytime soon. I compliment you for finding a job in one of the places closest to heaven on earth and sticking with it for a whole career. Writing from New Hampshire, surrounded by snow in April, makes me wonder a little why I didn't do the same. One day, long ago, while I was holding the reins of InfoSci, a somewhat confusing call came through the department office. After a few failing attempts, the caller and I established our identities. He was a young faculty member from a neighboring university. Proceeding, he shouted with a strong foreign accent, "How are ya?" I was not sure why he cared, but gave a readout of my current state of health. He mumbled dissatisfaction and then repeated, "How's are ya?" Long pause on my part. "Oh, how is Ira?" It was a friend of yours calling the department number, expecting to be put through to you. Of course, you were off in Stevenson, but eventually I got him pointed in the right direction. This is your fest, and this letter should be about you and your accomplishments. Of course, UCSC hired you because you were the best of the crop from Stanford. But you and I parted ways more than 30 years ago. I left because I needed to write programs for serious users and needed not to deal with the frustrations of academia. Teaching was important, but as it turned out, it was not enough. Too bad it took me so long to figure it out. So I don't have much firsthand information on you and your career, just paper and the internet. Thin soup indeed for a fest. In those early days, you were into artificial intelligence and I was into compilers. Both of us were programmers. Perhaps surprising, we separately spent much of the next few years doing parallel things. I went from Park to Wang to Harvard to digital, abandoning XPL and Pascal for Mach Lisp and C. I wrote a fast turnaround C89 compiler for digital. At the same time, you were writing student texts, teaching C, and presumably cajoling the campus into making the switch. I helped port a Java compiler to the digital alpha, and you wrote a book dissecting Java. Dragging my heels all the way, I eventually wrote gobs of C++ code for MathWorks. You wrote a book about C++. Finally, we took different directions. All of my recent code, including compilers, has been written in MATLAB. Your new love is apparently C#. But on the whole, we had a lot in common in those years. It seems as if Santa Cruz could not hold your attention all the time. I see distinguished visits to Berkeley, Amsterdam, and Auckland in your bio. Despite my industrial obligations, I managed to write a Java simulation for a spaceborne particle detector while working at CERN, and to teach compilers to a room full of Indian professors at Chitkara University. Answering the cocktail party question, whatever happened to Bill, I left for the East Coast in 1980, married again in 1982, and now have 7 children scattered around the world. The youngest twins are both flyers, each having done stints with Cirque du Soleil, as well as other gigs, including a bit part in Water for Elephants and a corpo in Cairo. Our family stay at CERN gave them both French. Since then, one of them has added Mandarin and the other German. The 3 boys you knew at Santa Cruz include one charismatic jack of all trades, now retired, can it be so? Another is a med tech executive, and the third is a chef specializing in Native American cuisine. My first 2 kids were living in Mexico with their mother by the time I arrived at UC Santa Cruz. Both write science fiction. One translates for Spanish-speaking patients in Seattle, and the other is a patent-holding programmer for Oracle, and lives just down the street here in Snowsville. We're all getting together in August for my 80th. Tomorrow, I will be hosting my ex-boss from Digital at Dartmouth. She is giving inspirational talks for women in the computer field. While you are being toasted in California, I will be in Rochester giving a talk to the computer science department. After that, I will be doing some boots-on-the-ground genealogical research, which has consumed most of my time since I retired. So let me say, congratulations on your career, and may you continue to win every chess match that comes your way. Your old friend, Bill McKeeman. So, Ira, Bill and I like to congratulate you on your distinguished career and best wishes for the future.
Thank you, Lynn. Our next speaker is Fokion Kalaitis. Fokion is a distinguished professor of computer science who joined UC Santa Cruz in 1988. His research areas include principles of database systems, logic and computer science, and computational complexity. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm both delighted and honored to be here today and have this opportunity to share with you some reflections on Ira's contributions over the years. Let me start by saying that I met Ira a little over 26 years ago. It was March 1988 when I came to interview for a faculty position at the department which by that time had changed names from Information and Computer Science to Computer and Information Science. Of course, I had heard of Ira long before I came here and met him in person. I joined the department in the fall of 1988, and by that time, Ira had assumed the duties of department chair, a term, for a 3-year term. He stayed from 1988 until 1991. As we already heard, this was not the first time that Ira served as department chair. He already had taken over in the period 1979 to 1981. And as it turned out, it was not the last one either. Between 2002 and 2008, Ira chaired the computer science department. By that time, we had dropped the information sciences, the computer science department, and then he earned a sabbatical, but came back for the last time in 2009 and 2010. This was the last time he served as department chair. All in all, this is 12 years of service as department chair. This is an unparalleled record that none of us can come even close to ever matching. I mention this as an example of Ira's commitment to the institution and of his willingness to step up and serve anytime he was asked to serve. Let me give you another example. One of the most distinctive features of the University of California is the system of shared governance. This system makes it possible for faculty to have a voice and to participate in the operation of the university by serving on major academic senate committees. And over the years, Ira has pretty much served on every major committee of the academic senate, campus-wide committee on this campus. Let me mention, for instance, his participation on the Committee on Educational Policy. This is the committee that has authority over all matters of undergraduate education. The very heavy-duty Committee on Academic Personnel, which opines on every personnel action involving a faculty, merit increase, promotion, and tenure. And actually, Ira spent, I think, on this committee, by my count, 5 or 6 years. The last 4 was when we had the new School of Engineering, and he was the first faculty from the School of Engineering to represent the school in this committee. And last but not least, a committee that I believe is very dear to Ira, the Committee on Academic Freedom, which he served several times. The last time was 2011, 2012, at which time which he chaired the committee. And this is a committee that maybe it's very quiet if nothing happens, but when something happens, the committee has its hands full. Now, as if this is not enough service, Ira spent the last year before his retirement by serving as the School of Engineering Associate Dean for Online Education. In this capacity, he pushed the campus to consider online education and was the leading force behind the partnership of UCSC with Coursera. Now, if you are like me, you may have preferred that this campus had joined another online platform, a platform that is not for profit. However, that's not a decision that any individual faculty, not even Ira, could make. The point here is that UCSC could not afford to fall behind in the online education movement, and Ira took the lead to make sure that UCSC has not fallen behind. Turning to Ira's contributions as a researcher and educator, previous speakers have already spoken eloquently. I should just mention that he has made outstanding contributions to artificial intelligence, analysis of algorithms, programming languages, computer science education, and societal implications of artificial intelligence. In the afternoon session, Professor Korf will tell us about Ira's lasting contributions to heuristic search. Let me just mention that an indication of Ira's impact is that his work has withstood the test of time And some of this work has become standard textbook material in such classic books as Knuf's Volume 3 of the Art of Computing Programming. We have heard already about Ira's work on programming languages and ABC, the book he co-authored with his colleague Al Kelly, who is here today with us. And I should just mention that the method of programming teaching by dissection, C by dissection, and the other language by dissection has been widely adopted and imitated, and Ira's books have won a worldwide audience and have been translated in a number of languages, including Chinese, Japanese, Korean, German, Italian, Spanish, and Dutch, and I'm sure I have missed some languages. Finally, let me mention something about Ira's deep concern and contributions to the area of the social implications of computer science and artificial intelligence in particular. And I'd like to take you back to 1983. Some of you may remember that in 1983, President Reagan articulated a proposal that went by the name Strategic Defense Initiative, or SDI. This was a major departure because it represented a doctrine of strategic defense over the earlier doctrine of strategic offense based on mutual assured destruction. Materializing, implementing, if you will, this proposal would entail major advances in both science and technology. The scientific community expressed skepticism by and large, although there are also some voices of support. Ira participated in this debate in various ways, including writing a paper titled, "Should Robots Have Nuclear Arms?" and subtitled, AI Technology and SDI Software. In this paper, Ira provided a very articulate and penetrating analysis of the possible uses of artificial intelligence in building SDI software. His analysis focused on two possible uses of artificial intelligence in that space. The first was the use of AI in the automatic or semi-automatic verification of SDI software. The second, which Ira described as the most provocative one, was the potential use of AI as a component of the battle management software, including the possibility that software could make autonomous decisions concerning weapons release. I'm not going to tell you what Ira's findings were. The paper that he wrote makes fascinating reading even today, almost 30 years later, and I encourage you to find the time to read it. I will only mention that the paper concluded as follows: should robots have nuclear arms? To ask the question is to answer it. So in summary, Ira has been an exemplary citizen to our campus, an outstanding educator, and an influential researcher. It is a privilege to have been Ira's colleague for the past quarter of a century. So thank you, Ira, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Fokion. Okay, we're down to, I think, one and a half maybe. Lunch is around the corner, hang tight. Our next speaker is Stephen Clamage. Stephen is a senior staff engineer at Oracle and chair of the C++ Standards Committee. Welcome, Stephen.
Well, apparently I'm all that's standing between you and lunch, so I'll be brief. Ira and I first got in contact in the late-ish 1980s. C++ was a language that was still pretty new to most of the world. The only existing book was a 1986 book by the originator of C++, Bjarne Stroustrup. And my business partner and I were creating the first commercial compiler that wasn't based on the work that had been done at AT&T Labs. Ira was writing a book about C++. So I don't remember how this happened, but we got into contact. I think he wanted some input from people working with C++ to help with the book. And of course, I was very interested to see an academic take on the language. We were just trying to figure out what it was all about with emails to Bjarne Strostrup, trying to get explanations of the very heuristic description in the first book. So I thought the idea of a textbook for students was a pretty good idea. So we were in loose contact over years, and I later went to work at Sun Microsystems on their compiler, and I got there actually via Ted Goldstein sitting over here. This is another story which I won't get into right now. Ira at one point asked me if I would be willing to come talk to one of his graduate seminars. Two reasons from his point of view. One is somebody who is working in industry with C++, and how does this fit together? And also, by that time, I was chair of the C++ committee, and he was looking for insights into language direction that I could perhaps share with his classes. So I thought this was an interesting idea. So the first time I did this, I had a really great time. It was wonderful talking to a room full of graduate students who were knowledgeable on the subject and had interesting things to say and seemed to care about what I had to say, which was quite nice. So we maintained that relationship. Several times he would invite me to come talk to his classes, most recently just last year. And I think I had even more fun at that one. We had a little bit more time to talk than we had in the past. So that has been my primary interaction with Ira. I was never one of his students, but back in the 70s, UCSC had a couple of times a summer school in computer science. And I talked my employer into letting me attend one of those sessions. We had luminaries of the day, such as Niklaus Wirth, Edgar Dijkstra, and Frank de Riemer from UCSC gave talks there. And I thought that was wonderful, getting a chance to hear from these people. I don't remember running into Ira at the time. I would not have recognized his name if he was here then. So I've tremendously enjoyed the opportunity to work with Ira. I think that we have both gotten a fair amount out of the relationship. And I want to say congratulations on your excellent career here at UC Santa Cruz. And thanks for your time.
I'd like to thank all the speakers this morning, and we have a nice set of speakers in the afternoon. I want to make one announcement, which is Alan Wong mentioned the new Ira and Kate Pohl scholarship for undergraduates committed to science and society, and I'm really delighted to announce that Ira and Kate themselves have donated $10,000 to this scholarship fund, and I want to just thank them very much.